When my neighbor Karen showed up at my door screaming that my Wi-Fi signal was too loud, I honestly thought she had finally lost her mind. But I had no idea that her obsession would drag me into a nightmare that involved the FBI, the FCC, and even helicopters circling our quiet suburban street. And before I dive into this insane story of how one woman's vendetta over my internet nearly shut down an airport, make sure you like and subscribe to the HOA Whisperer, because what you're about to hear proves that HOA drama doesn't just ruin your lawn, it can spiral into federal chaos. It all began with Karen standing in my driveway, arms crossed like she was auditioning for Mall Cop of the Year, telling me I needed to turn down my Wi-Fi router or else she would fix it herself, and I laughed because who says that? But the laughter stopped when my connection began randomly dropping. Entire devices disconnecting like someone was deliberately blocking the signal. And when I pulled up my router diagnostics, I saw interference spikes that weren't from microwaves or baby monitors. They were structured bursts, the kind you'd see from a signal jammer. My stomach dropped as I thought about Karen's garage, where she was always tinkering with junkyard gadgets and secondhand radios, and when I walked the neighborhood with a Wi-Fi analyzer app, the interference lit up like fireworks every time I passed her driveway, proving she wasn't bluffing. She had actually built or bought some kind of jammer. At first, I tried to be civil, knocked on her door, asked politely if she had installed anything that might be interfering with the neighborhood's Wi-Fi. But Karen smirked and said, maybe if you people followed HOA rules, I wouldn't have to take matters into my own hands, before slamming the door in my face. And that's when I realized this wasn't just petty control, this was about power. Days later, flashing lights filled the street as Karen pointed at my house like she was reporting a murder, claiming I was running illegal broadcasting equipment and endangering planes at the regional airport. And when officers stepped inside to check my router, I was smugged until they walked back out and their radios crackled with static. Interference spiking again the moment they stepped near Karen's garage. I'll never forget the look on their faces when they opened her garage and saw the clunky mess of wires, antennas, and a power supply cobbled together like Frankenstein's toaster. And Karen, screaming it was just a harmless experiment, didn't matter because within minutes, FCC enforcement was called in. You'd think that would have been the end, but Karen was like a storm that refused to die down. The very next day, flyers appeared all over the neighborhood, accusing me of running a secret transmitter and putting children at risk. Neighbors who used to wave at me now gave me cold stares, and then the local news ran a vague segment about interference grounding flights. And suddenly, my coworkers were texting me jokes about Homeland Security raiding the office. The kicker? My Wi-Fi started glitching again, and when I tracked the interference spikes, they were worse than before, stronger. And by the next morning, the regional airport had temporarily grounded flights. That's when the vans came, not just FCC, but DHS, FAA, even TSA, sweeping our neighborhood with directional antennas. And Karen strutted out of her house in a pastel tracksuit, acting like she was in charge, directing agents toward my property while shouting about rogue signals. But when their scanners lit up, the trail pointed right back to her house. And for the first time, I saw Karen's mask slip, her face pale as they rolled vans into her driveway. She doubled down, shrieking that I had planted equipment to frame her, and unbelievably, some HOA board members nodded along, treating her paranoia like gospel. But when I set up my own SDR scanner to log interference, I caught her midnight bursts on record. Proof that she wasn't just meddling with my Netflix. She was disrupting aviation frequencies. When I handed the logs to the agents, their faces hardened, and soon they were pulling boxes out of Karen's attic filled with professional-grade gear she could never have built herself, which meant someone was backing her. That realization chilled me more than anything. Karen wasn't just a lunatic neighbor. She was a pawn in a bigger game. Days later, I discovered a second jammer hidden under a camo tarp in the greenbelt car batteries and a generator, humming like an angry hive, and when I yanked the cables in a reckless burst of anger, I knew I had crossed into dangerous territory. Because the next morning, a cargo flight was forced to divert due to radio anomalies. And suddenly, I wasn't just a witness, I was part of the crime scene. Karen, of course, seized the spotlight, holding lawn press conferences accusing me of running an underground communications bunker, even waving a hand-drawn map of imaginary tunnels beneath my house, and some neighbors actually believed her. I knew I had to flip the script, so I compiled a dossier of data logs, photos of the hidden jammer and her ridiculous flyers. And when the agents studied it, they finally began to shift suspicion away from me and toward her mysterious backers. But Karen sensed it too, and one night she pounded on my door, face red, hair frizzed, screaming that I would regret crossing her. And when I calmly asked, "Karen, who's helping you?" her eyes flickered just long enough to confirm what I already knew: she wasn't alone. The very next morning, helicopters thundered over the neighborhood, SUVs lined the streets, and black-suited agents set up portable antennas in front yards, while Karen stood in oversized sunglasses giving a fake press conference on her driveway, waving a photo of me mowing my lawn as evidence of espionage. The agents didn't laugh. They scanned the airwaves, muttering about Class C interference and multiple sources, confirming my worst fear. Karen wasn't the mastermind, just the face of a sabotage ring. Following the signals one night, I tracked them to an industrial park where a fake plumbing van sat humming with hidden radios and antennas. And inside, I glimpsed a stranger hunched over consoles, clearly the real operator, pulling Karen's strings. I logged everything, tracked the van's nightly movements, and finally handed the data to an agent who whispered, "If you've got something, now's the time." That night, sirens screamed through the neighborhood as federal teams boxed in the van, dragging out 2 men in handcuffs and racks of military-grade jammers, and even Karen's staunchest supporters fell silent. The next morning headlines confirmed, "It's a domestic interference ring busted," but Karen wasn't spared, because soon agents returned to her house, cuffing her in her pajamas as she shrieked about conspiracies, while neighbors filmed her downfall, and within hours, the footage of her being shoved into a federal van went viral. The neighborhood limped back toward normal, flights resumed, the SUVs disappeared, and the HOA issued a laughable memo banning experimental electronic equipment in garages. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished, because hidden in the interference logs I captured before the arrests was a second pattern. Sharper, more precise. Not Karen's, not the men in the van, but something offshore, something that felt bigger than all of us. And so I kept my scanner running at night, because if there's one thing I learned surviving Karen, it's this: in the HOA world, petty power trips can spark federal disasters. The loudest voices aren't always the guiltiest, and sometimes the only way to win is to keep your head, keep your receipts, and wait for the storm to burn itself out. And if that storm ever returns, trust my L, be ready.